Welcome to What's Your Story? I'm your host, Charlie Timmons. I'm here today with another fantastic guest. This one happens to be authentic and genuine, has some great insights, practical information that you can put to work immediately in your business or in your personal life. My guest today is Morris Yankell. He is the principal at HR Computes, and they have a little bit to do with HR. So today our focus is how can we make HR a better business partner for the business and the kind of outcomes they can create. Morris has a passion for human resources. I think he has a degree in that. He loves employee engagement and how technology adoption can really make a difference. He's been described as a mentor, an educator, a project manager, and above all else, a great coworker.
Thank you, Charlie.
Morris,
Pleasure.
welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
I'm looking forward to this. Now,
Excellent.
Why don't we just jump right into it and explain to the audience what is it that you and HR Computes does?
Sure. So HR Computes, we do not sell software. We make it work for human resources. So that means, what do people have today and how do they get more out of it? It's not always about the new shiny object. If they want to move to something new, then we help them through that. Don't get caught looking at the squirrel. So from the, dog sees a squirrel, don't go down that path. Ask the tough questions. Ask the questions that you're going to ask to every vendor. And then on the implementation side, know what it is that you want to get out of the software implementation. Make sure that's negotiated into the budget, into the implementation plan. And then really get more than just the basics out of the software. That's what we help companies do.
Why do companies buy the software in the first place?
Well, human resources these days in most companies, from the time you are a candidate to the time you're a retiree, your data is in one system or another. And that means that you're putting your applicant tracking data. When you're a candidate, you're putting it in. When you onboard, you go through. Now your data's over in the payroll system. Now you get paid. Now you get developed. Now you get performance appraisals, et cetera, throughout your life cycle of being an employee. And it's all done in some kind of technology. Unfortunately, a lot of times those technologies don't talk to each other, or we don't have the ability to pull the data out. We didn't implement it maybe the correct way, or we just didn't have that foresight, that vision to what kinds of things do we want to get out of the system, and that's what we need to get and make sure we put in the system.
Well, talk a little bit about the buyer's journey. How does a company go about selecting the proper software product?
So usually a company will, these days, they'll do some internet research. I mean, it's really kind of interesting. There are some websites out there where you can see you enter maybe 4 or 5 questions, and you will then see recommended software that you might want to look into. Now, those companies who own those websites, they get paid when you call that software vendor. So are they being objective in giving you the best ideas about what software fits your needs? Or are they looking to make a buck? Either way, you are not getting necessarily an expert who is looking at the overall picture of the kinds of things that you need to get done, they're not asking you in-depth questions about the pieces of the business that you want that software to support. And so you may end up with the wrong software. It's a costly expedition to implement software, and it is a lot of work. Pretty much no one who's been through a software implementation wants to ever do it again. So if you've implemented 3 to 5 years later, you've got to implement again, you're in trouble. So making that selection the right way is something that a lot of people can use help with.
So explain how you're different, the role that you play. You're not a seller of software, so talk a little bit about when are you brought into the picture?
So we can be brought in at the beginning. That's when we'd like to be brought in, because that's when we feel we can have the most impact. We can help the company understand the differences between the software because we base those differences on the same questions asked to every vendor. They don't always bring us in. A lot of times they'll bring us in when they realize, hey, this is a lot of work. This is a big project. So then they'll say, we need some extra help. We need some eyes on this, whether it's program or project management, or whether it's just an expert opinion around what's the best way to get the most out of that software. So either way happens to us all the time.
Why doesn't the software company just do what you do?
Well, the software company makes their money on subscriptions. So we don't buy software anymore, we rent software.
Oh, so it's a SaaS app, as software as a service
Exactly.
application.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the internet, right, it's taken over, everything's in the cloud, and we don't own software, we rent the software. So the idea is that people want that subscription amount. Once you're up and running, once you're live, then the vendor starts to get that monthly subscription. So they're in the business of increasing subscriptions. They're in the business of securing that monthly payment. They're not really in the business of making you happy with their product. They don't want you to leave, but you're locked into a 3 to 5 year kind of contract. And to them, their money starts once you've run payroll once or twice, once you've gotten core HR. But to me, and to our company, HR computes makes a difference because the technology that you get in phase 2, the technology, things like onboarding, things like employee development, things like performance appraisal, those are the important parts. Those are the shiny objects that you loved when you saw the demo. So those are the pieces that we really encourage organizations to concentrate on and to try and get their money's worth. They need to understand, how do we get those pieces up and running?
So talk about you being brought in at the very beginning.
Sure.
When they're trying to develop a needs assessment, if you will.
So needs assessment, Charlie, I didn't realize you were so technical. That's very good.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
I do this for a living, you know.
Yes, I've heard. No, I know what you do for a living, and you do a great job. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
But needs assessment, I mean, these days a needs assessment is often something that can be done much more quickly than sort of, a few years ago. The whole idea of putting out a request for proposal, an RFP, used to be a 100-page document. These days, no vendor is really interested in seeing a 100-page document. So a lot of times what you do is you end up with a list of maybe 20 things. Those things are things you must have, things you would like to have, and then pie in the sky. What would we like to be doing in 3 to 5 years? So you are able to kind of tie those questions to that RFP and use that as the agenda to go through the conversations with the vendors.
To what degree does the company who's purchasing the software, to what degree do they know what the right questions are to ask?
I think if people have gone through this process, then they may understand the types of questions. I think what we bring to the table is a depth and breadth of experience of having done it, 20 or 30 times for organizations. So it's also the understanding that if I'm in benefits, I need my employees to be able to easily put in their benefit, easily select benefits during open enrollment. But as we were just talking to some people out in the lobby, there are systems where that benefit is calculated based on your age. And then there are other types of insurance that are not calculated that way. So setting something up the right way is crucial. And knowing the types of benefits you have, and then knowing that you have to ask the vendor the question of, can your system handle this kind of a benefit? Can your system handle this, something that we have that may be unique to us? It probably isn't, but may be unique to us. Communicating that to the vendor is something that we're real strong at. It's that ability to translate what is human resources and how is it generally reflected in technology so that you get a real answer. Is this system going to be able to meet your needs as an organization?
So the term I hear a lot about software is the ability to scale with the company. Is this what you're talking about bringing in the right product so that it can grow? Like the typical companies you work with, how many people are in those companies?
So I think scale is a good way to look at it, and complexity might be the other piece here that gets added in.
Let's talk about that.
Something like being able to recruit is something that a lot of these applicant tracking systems do pretty easily. So it will put ads out on the internet and people can apply. Now, how well their resume gets parsed or set up in that system changes based on the complexity of that system, changes based on the complexity or capabilities of that vendor. The other piece here is maybe your recruiters, not maybe, your recruiters ought to be using something within the system to kind of hash through those applicants. So if you are a small company and you get maybe 50 applicants, it's not that much work for someone to look at each resume. But if you're a large company, you're getting 500 or 1,000 or 1,000 every day, as we did when we implemented at Novartis Pharmaceutical. 1,000 every day means that you've got to have some technology that's going to help you rank and rate those candidates, because you just can't do it anymore. So I think that complexity and that scalability, when you're a smaller company, there are pieces that you might not need that when you're a larger company, and cost often comes with complexity, but you might need those kinds of things. But to your point of who are our clients, we find generally that a business that is human resources intensive, a business that is where they make their money is from their people or with their people, right, then they need to take better care of their people. So it seems as if from our research, it's usually 2,000 or more employees, because at that point you can't do it anymore on the back of a napkin. It's hard to do that kind of thing in Excel. So that's where they're starting to look at, and quite honestly, they have the money to be able to invest in a system that does more, and with a consultant who can help them get more out of that system.
Share with the audience, if you will, your journey to founding your own company, et cetera. Give them a sense of where you've been.
Cool. I have a master's degree in human resources.
Really?
From the New School of Social Research in New York City. So it was a very interesting and very diverse school. They own Parsons, the School of Design. They own a School of English and another School of Performing Arts. So it was an eclectic mix of people, and that's one of the things that kind of encouraged me to look at human resources. I thought that I was going to kind of go into labor relations and organization development, and they put a PC on my desk. So at that time, I was able to understand how to do some technology things. I did some programming, but also I was able to communicate with HR and explain what that system could do for them or to them, and talk to vendors, and talk to senior executives, and speak to the senior IT folks. And it became this role of this liaison, this kind of communicator across boundaries. And that became my own business. So we've been in business for 30 years. It's been a great run. You are only as good as your next client. Keeps us hungry, keeps us always passionate. But that's kind of the story.
So we need to take a break and hear from our sponsors. So
Excellent.
If you will, please stay tuned. We'll be back with Morris in a few minutes. Going to go a little bit deeper and see what kind of wisdom we can get from our meeting today. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
That's perfect for me.
Thanks, Liz.
A woman without a lot of time.
Whether you're a gourmet cook or just want to eat like one, visit Rostelli Market Fresh, your home for the freshest, locally sourced ingredients to please everyone who loves great food. Our organic meats, quality seafood, and free-range poultry are cut fresh to order. Chefs create culinary-inspired prep foods made fresh every day, which pair nicely with our vast selection of fine wines and spirits. Choose from handmade pastas, artisan cheeses, organic produce, and grocery items, all from the finest purveyors. Rostelli Market Fresh, from our family to yours.
RVN TV is a platform for people of any industry to share their story. Over 285,000 viewers are tuning in to RVN TV shows monthly. We guarantee a great experience that you'll be sharing with everyone you know while increasing your personal and company.
So we're back. Welcome back to What's Your Story? I'm your host, Charlie Timmons, and I'm here today with Morris Yankell. We're learning a lot about HR and the role that technology plays in making sure that HR serves the community the way it should. You were telling us about your early journey where someone put a PC on your desk and suddenly, it's sort of like a router in a network. It connects everything together. It all goes through one source. And I was getting that image of you in that role, being able to do that. So expand on that a little bit.
So I think that's a role that software vendors choose potentially not to take. Again, we had said that vendors generally are getting paid based on the subscription, and once they get the system up and running, they start getting paid monthly. So that communicator role, that person who is taking a look and really being the cop for the client, to understand what's their long-term strategy. Even long-term strategy might be too long of a word. Strategy in this case could be 6 months. You're going to get the payroll up and running. You're going to get core HR up and running. But when you start to look at the next step, how do you increase employee engagement using some of this technology? How do you really know that employees are utilizing the metrics and analytics that you might be producing? Or how do you know, or even how is it on your roadmap to create dashboards that senior management can use? I think those are the things to me that was a hole that we could fill, and it's something that's really important. You really need to adopt the technology, because we've seen in many cases where people, it's easy to sabotage technology. It's easy to let something kind of rot on the vine. Something new happens and people don't use it, and eventually people will kind of say, well, the system is bad. The system, and I'm not a huge fan of the system of any kind, but the system is generally will be able to do something. It's how do the people adopt that technology and adapt to the way that that technology works.
So you went into your own business. You saw a market need. So talk about that market need and how you've capitalized on that for your business.
So it's a good question. I think the market need there is one that it's a value proposition that is part of the sell of what do we do. A company comes to a vendor and they are going to pay for the software. They're going to pay monthly, as we said, and then they are also going to probably pay some sort of a fee to have that software implemented, meaning transfer the data from one system, put it into the new system. Give those people the background configuration capability to set that system up. But what they don't do is concentrate on how to make that system work the best way it can for the population they're serving. And the piece of that is that today we don't buy software. It used to be that you put it on your server, you had a whole host of IT folks, and those people helped you understand how that system works. Today, it is in the cloud. And the cloud is great because you get much more functionality, you get automatic upgrades, but it also requires care and feeding. You've got to know what that system can do, and you've got to understand the new functionality that's coming out. Someone has to be there to figure out how do we use this for the long run for the organization. And that's a piece that we really have succeeded in helping multiple companies do.
Well, can you share a story of a client success?
Sure. So there's a great company in the non-destructive testing business, which is a really interesting kind of, right, it's one of those where you say non-destructive testing, yeah. But it's bridges, tunnels, pipelines, refineries, and it's sonograms, it's x-rays, it's drones, it's people coming down on ropes to manually inspect, all of those kinds of things. And that company makes their money based on these technicians who are doing all this work. So it's 5,000 employees, and they purchased a new system. We came in right at the tail end of that decision, and then we were asked to stay on because they realized this is bigger than a bread box. So they came on, we helped them with it, and it was so much more than just let's get payroll up and running. Now, we lost our payroll manager along the way during the implementation. We lost our senior HR technology person during the implementation. So theirs were holes that we were able to help them fill, but also continuity to give them the kind of documentation and understanding going forward of what you guys did at the beginning definitely impacts what's going to happen at the end. But so much more so in this case, we were able to help them with employee self-service, manager self-service, and things in manager self-service that were kind of not unique, but conditional. So for example, if you're giving an increase that's over a 5% increase, it needs to go to different people than it does if it's just the regular 3% increase. If you're terminating someone, that needs to go to human resources before it's approved to make sure you're not doing something wrong or discriminatory. So that kind of workflow was something that was in the system, but if you asked a lot of the people who own that system, could it do it? I think you'd get a lot of head shakes. In this case, we were there to help them understand what the system could do, and then to work with them to understand their policies and really adapt it, adapt it to the way that the system works.
It sounds like a very holistic approach that you're bringing into that area to make the investment get the kind of return that's expected of it.
And I think one other piece, Charlie, that's crucial in this case is that it's the return on investment that a lot of times human resources doesn't necessarily kind of articulate, or any user, not just HR. I think it happens in finance. I think it happens in supply chain. So again, in the story with that company, we changed the onboarding process. So it's a company where often they would have 20 or 30 people start on the same day. And so how do they get those people up and running as fast as possible? It would take them days to spend 2 or 3 hours with each individual where that person is filling out forms and being told or shown the handbook and go through things with them. Instead, the onboarding process kind of put that to the side of the employee to get that done before they got started, before their first day. And you could say, for 20 people at 2 or 3 hours, for the amount that it cost for that person to do that work, you've now cut it to 20 minutes. So you've got a savings of, and you can do the math and show an immediate ROI.
What I'm looking at is from that new employee's point of view, and the experience, the onboarding experience they have, which is incredibly positive. Any new candidate is nervous, they're worried, they want to make sure they made a right decision to join that company. And if they enter the company and they have this kind of sophistication and ease of use, it really makes a positive impact.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that comes to another great point, is that the client experience that most people are now used to as a consumer is something that we hear a lot about in the industry around client experience, and now they're talking about employee experience. So that idea that the way that we treat our clients is something that our employees are used to and something that they expect of us, and something that quite honestly impacts the way that the rest of the world sees our company is very important now. The example to me that I use all the time is in applicant tracking, and we've all been unemployed, except you, Charlie. And we have all had to put our resumes into a system. Well, that system, it's the black hole into which you throw your resume, because quite often you don't hear anything from anyone about that resume. And if you're lucky enough to get an automatic reply, it'll say thanks for applying. And then you may have an interview, you may have a phone call, you may have an in-person meeting. And again, you hear nothing. Quite often they call this ghosting. But these systems that folks are spending an awful lot of money on, the functionality is in there, and it's very easy to turn on to communicate with that employee. And it's something that we set up all the time with people. Send them an email every 2 weeks that says you're still under consideration. The point of this to me is that every candidate is a potential client. It's easy to understand when you're in the business of selling chocolate. But when you're in the business of cable TV, it's easy to understand. Maybe when you're an engineering firm or something like that, but still, those people who have applied to you as a candidate, if you treat them like dirt, they are going to get a bad impression of you, and they are going to spread that impression.
Well, I think the companies are getting more and more aware that all their employees are brand ambassadors, and the process they use to attract new people has to be stellar and represent a very positive experience for people. Can you talk about some of the other elements of the value proposition, if you will, that comes from working with your firm?
Sure. So I think a lot of times what we get is the idea that you can really, that return on investment are pieces that the system can help you show, and being able to understand how to draw those out. So the words analytics these days, AI, those kinds of dashboards, those kinds of things, those are very much buzzwords, but most of the systems have that innate ability to do those kinds of things, but it's just not tapped into. So I think that's definitely an area where we bring extra value. And then I think the other side of it is things like employee development. We have seen many, many cases where employee engagement drives productivity. So things like employee surveys, and then acting on those surveys. We were talking earlier about how the pendulum has kind of swung from data to information and now to insight. And it's great to get that insight. And I think the example that we were using was with Google. When you put in a couple of searches or they see what you're looking for, then boom, up comes an ad for something that's related to that. It's a very low risk sort of AI. It's a very low risk kind of thing for them. AI in human resources is something that is crucial to understand and crucial to use as a tool, but it doesn't replace the human piece of interpreting that insight and now using that in a smart way. So things, we've seen some of the suits and lawsuits about, I think it was Amazon or Google, companies where they were using AI, but it had an inherent kind of discriminatory bias. If you let the system make a decision, then you could fall victim to that. But on the other hand, this is an augmented insight. It's something that's helping you just say, something to help you have something extra to think about.
Better decision making.
Better decision making is the intent, exactly.
We're at the end of our show. There's more to talk about, and our audience may want to learn more from you about what you might be able to do to help their organization. So this is the point where I have you look into the camera, speak to the audience, and share whatever you want.
Well, thank you, Charlie.
Time's yours.
I appreciate it. First, I'm very thankful. Charlie is a great friend, and I think he does an excellent job helping people kind of figure out their story. And it's a pleasure here to be on What's Your Story and be able to kind of tell mine. HR Computes, to me, the name sort of said it all. It's supposed to be human resources and computers, or human resources technology. The idea is these days you cannot live without technology, but you have to be able to get your money's worth. What we do is we help an organization understand what they need out of the technology, what's the path to getting that out of the technology, what are the resources they need, what are the tasks they need to do, and then how do they judge success? So getting something done like payroll, 100% is merely acceptable. In this case, we need to figure out what's a success, and then we need to make sure that people understand we've been successful. And the demonstration of that success is in happier employees, more engaged employees, more productive employees, and quite honestly, a more profitable organization. You can get that out of HR technology.
How would people get in touch with you?
Thank you. Yes, my email is morris@hrcomputes.com. If you send me an email or give me a phone call, 856-982-7162.
Repeat that, would you?
856-982-7162. You could send me a note or a text or give me a call, and if you mention what's your story, that definitely gives me a line of sight into where did you hear about me. And a phone call is free, a consultation is free. We know we can help you. I look forward to hearing from you.
Morris, I really want to thank you for coming on the show.
Charlie.
This was very enlightening.
Thank you.
Not only for myself, but for the audience. So again, thank you for tuning in to What's Your Story. Next week, I'll be here with another guest who's insightful and authentic to provide you with information you can put to use immediately. Have a great week and be well.
Thank you.